I never thought I'd be telling this story. Even now, as I sit here in the darkness, I can barely believe what happened to me. But I have to share it. People need to know the truth about our world, about the lies we've been told. It all started on a normal Tuesday morning. I woke up to the sound of my alarm, just like any other day. The sun was barely peeking through my curtains as I dragged myself out of bed. I had no idea that by the end of the day, my entire world would be turned upside down. As I got ready for work, I turned on the TV to catch the morning news. The president was giving a speech about some new law. I wasn't really paying attention until I noticed something strange. For just a second, it looked like the president's eyes changed. They became slitted, like a snake's eyes. I blinked and shook my head. When I looked again, everything seemed normal. I must be more tired than I thought, I mumbled to myself. I grabbed my coffee and headed out the door, trying to shake off the weird feeling I had. At work, things were pretty normal at first. I sat at my desk answering emails and filling out reports, but then my coworker Sarah came over to chat. "Did you see the president's speech this morning?" she asked. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yeah, I caught some of it. Did you notice anything weird?" Sarah looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then she leaned in close and whispered, "I thought I saw his face change for a second, like it wasn't human." My heart started racing, so I wasn't the only one who saw it. "I saw it too," I whispered back. "What do you think it means?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't know, but I'm scared. Something's not right." For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on my work. My mind kept going back to what I'd seen that morning. When I got home, I decided to do some research. I opened my laptop and started searching for information about reptilian shapeshifters. At first, it seemed like just another crazy conspiracy theory. But the more I read, the more things started to make sense. There were stories from all over the world about powerful people whose appearances would change for brief moments. Their eyes would become slitted, their skin would look scaly. Some people even claimed to have seen world leaders transform into full-on reptile creatures. As I dug deeper, I found whispered rumors of a secret society of reptilian aliens who had been controlling Earth for thousands of years. They were said to be cold-blooded, both literally and figuratively. These creatures supposedly took on human form to manipulate us, to keep us under their control. I stayed up all night reading. By the time the sun came up, my eyes were burning and my head was spinning. Could it really be true? Were our world leaders actually shape-shifting reptiles in disguise? I knew I needed proof, but how could I get it? I was just a regular person with a boring office job. How could I possibly uncover a conspiracy this big? Little did I know, my search for the truth was about to lead me down a dark and dangerous path. A path that would put my life in danger and make me question everything I thought I knew about our world. As I finally fell into an uneasy sleep that morning, I had no idea that I was about to be pulled into a terrifying adventure, one that would reveal the shocking truth about the Reptilian Elite. I woke up feeling groggy and disoriented. My alarm was blaring, telling me it was time to get ready for work. But after the night I'd had, how could I just go about my normal day? I called in sick to work, knowing I needed time to process everything I'd learned. As I made myself some coffee, my hands shook. Was I losing my mind? Or had I stumbled upon a terrifying truth that most people couldn't even imagine? I spent the day digging deeper into the reptilian conspiracy. I found grainy videos that claimed to show politicians shape-shifting during speeches, photos of world leaders with strangely slitted pupils. It was disturbing, but not exactly solid proof. Then I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was a list of people who had tried to expose the Reptilian Elite. Some had disappeared without a trace. Others died in mysterious accidents. A chill ran down my spine as I realized how dangerous this information could be. But I couldn't stop now. I had to know the truth, no matter the cost. As night fell, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The streets were quiet, lit only by flickering street lamps. As I turned a corner, I saw a sleek black car parked across the street. 2 men in dark suits were standing next to it, watching me. My heart started pounding. Were they government agents? Or something worse? I quickened my pace, trying not to look suspicious, but I could hear footsteps behind me getting closer. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, ready to fight or run, but it was Sarah, my coworker. "Thank God I found you," she said, out of breath. "We need to talk. It's not safe here." She led me to a small cafe nearby. As we sat down, Sarah looked around nervously before speaking in a low voice. "I've been doing research too," she said, "and I think I found something big, but now I think I'm being followed." I leaned in closer. "What did you find?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It looked like security camera footage from inside a government building. At first, everything seemed normal. Then suddenly, one of the men in the video changed. His skin rippled and shifted, becoming green and scaly. For a few seconds, he looked like a humanoid lizard before shifting back to human form. "Is this real?" I whispered, my mouth dry. Sarah nodded. "I think so. My friend works in IT for the government. He found this buried in some old files, but after he showed it to me, he disappeared. No one's seen him in days." I felt sick to my stomach. This was proof, actual proof that the reptilians were real. But now we were in serious danger. "We need to get this out," I said. "People need to know the truth." Sarah shook her head. "It's not that simple. These creatures control everything. The media, the internet, the government. How can we fight against that?" As we sat there trying to figure out what to do, I noticed 2 men enter the cafe. They were wearing suits and dark sunglasses even though it was night. They sat down at a nearby table, but I could feel them watching us. "We need to go," I whispered to Sarah. "Now." We got up casually and walked towards the door. But as we stepped outside, more men in suits appeared, surrounding us. "Come with us," one of them said in a cold, flat voice. "We have some questions for you." I looked at Sarah, seeing my own fear reflected in her eyes. We were in way over our heads, and now it seemed like the Reptilian Elite had found us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Sarah and I were shoved into the back of a black SUV with tinted windows. The men in suits sat on either side of us, their faces emotionless. As we drove through the dark city streets, my mind raced. What were they going to do to us? Would we disappear like Sarah's friend? I tried to stay calm, to think of a way out of this, but it seemed hopeless. After what felt like hours, the SUV pulled up to a nondescript office building. We were led inside and down a long hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel surreal. Finally, we were pushed into a small windowless room. A single table sat in the center with chairs on either side. One of the men in suits gestured for us to sit. "Wait here," he said in that same flat voice. Then they left, locking the door behind them. Sarah and I looked at each other, both of us trembling. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. Before I could answer, the door opened again. A tall, thin man in an expensive suit walked in. He had sharp features and piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through me. "So," he said, sitting down across from us, "you've been poking your noses where they don't belong." I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. We just want to know the truth." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The truth? You couldn't handle the truth. Your little human minds can't comprehend the vastness of what's really going on." As he spoke, I noticed something strange. His skin seemed to shimmer, like it was moving beneath the surface. And his eyes, for a moment they changed, becoming reptilian slits. Sarah gasped beside me. The man's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked just a little too sharp. "You wanted proof?" he said. "Well, here it is." Before our eyes, his whole body began to change. His skin turned green and scaly, his face elongated into a snout. Within seconds, we were staring at a creature that was part human, part reptile. I couldn't breathe. It was all real. Everything we'd read about, everything we'd feared. It was all true. The reptilian leaned forward, its forked tongue flicking out. "Now then," it hissed, "let's talk about what you're going to do with this information." I sat there, frozen in terror as the reptilian creature stared at us with its cold, inhuman eyes. My mind was reeling, trying to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of trick, a hallucination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. What are you?" I managed to stammer out. The creature let out a low, hissing laugh. "We are the ones who have ruled your world from the shadows for millennia. We are your gods, your kings, your presidents. We are the Reptilian Elite." Sarah was shaking beside me, her face pale with fear. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" The reptilian's face twisted into what might have been a smile, but on its inhuman features it looked more like a grimace. "Why? For power, of course, for control. Your species is young, primitive. You need guidance, structure. We provide that." I felt a surge of anger cut through my fear. By lying to us? By pretending to be human? "Would you really have accepted us in our true form?" the creature asked. "No, you would have feared us, fought us. This way we can guide humanity's development without resistance." As it spoke, I noticed something on the table. It was a small device, something like a remote control. An idea began to form in my mind. If I could just reach it. "And what happens now?" I asked, trying to keep the reptilian talking. "Are you going to kill us?" The creature tilted its head, considering. "That depends on you. You could be useful to us. Spread disinformation, discredit the conspiracy theories. Or..." As it spoke, I slowly inched my hand towards the device on the table, just a little further. Suddenly, the reptilian's eyes narrowed. It had noticed what I was doing. With lightning-fast reflexes, it lunged across the table. But I was faster. My fingers closed around the device and I pressed the biggest button I could see. A high-pitched whine filled the room. The reptilian creature let out an ear-splitting shriek, clutching its head. Its body began to contort and shift, like it was stuck between human and reptile form. "Run!" I yelled to Sarah, grabbing her hand. We bolted for the door, which had swung open when I activated the device. We ran down the hallway, alarms blaring around us. Behind us, I could hear angry shouts and the sound of pursuit. But we didn't stop. We couldn't stop. Somehow, we made it out of the building. The cool night air hit us as we burst through the doors. Without a word, we kept running, not daring to look back. As we fled into the darkness, I realized our lives would never be the same. We had seen the truth, the reality behind the lies we'd been told our whole lives. And now, we were being hunted by creatures straight out of our worst nightmares. But we had proof now. We had seen it with our own eyes. And somehow, some way, we had to let the world know the truth about the Reptilian Elite. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs felt like jelly. Finally, we ducked into an alley, gasping for breath. I peered out onto the street, looking for any sign of pursuit. For now, it seemed like we had lost them. What do we do now?" Sarah panted, leaning against the wall. I shook my head, trying to think. "We need to get somewhere safe, somewhere we can figure out our next move." But where was safe? The reptilians seemed to control everything. Who could we trust? Then I remembered something. An old friend of mine, Jake, was big into conspiracy theories. He'd tried to tell me about the reptilians years ago, but I'd laughed it off. Now, he might be our only hope. "I know where we can go," I told Sarah, "but it's going to be a long walk." We stuck to back alleys and side streets, jumping at every sound. It took hours, but finally we reached Jake's place. It was a small house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a high fence. I rang the doorbell, praying Jake still lived here. After a tense minute, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack, and I saw Jake's suspicious face peering out. His eyes widened when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Then he noticed our disheveled appearance and frightened expressions. "What happened?" "Jake," I said, my voice shaking. "You were right. About everything, we need your help." Jake's face went pale. Without another word, he ushered us inside, quickly shutting and locking the door behind us. The inside of Jake's house was like a bunker. The windows were covered with thick curtains, and every wall was plastered with newspaper clippings, photos, and handwritten notes. "Tell me everything," Jake said as he sat us down in his cluttered living room. So we did. We told him about the video Sarah had seen, about being captured, about the reptilian revealing itself to us. Jake listened intently, his face growing more serious with every word. When we finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he stood up and walked over to a large corkboard covered in string and photos. "I've been tracking their movements for years," he said, "but I've never had solid proof. Until now." He turned back to us, his eyes blazing with determination. "This is it. This is our chance to blow the whole thing wide open, to show the world the truth." I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since this nightmare began. "How do we do that?" Jake grinned. "I've got some ideas, but first we need to make sure you're safe. They'll be looking for you." He led us to a hidden trap door in his floor. Below was a small bunker, stocked with food, water, and supplies. "You'll be safe here," Jake said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning our next move." As Sarah and I settled into the cramped bunker, I couldn't help but wonder what we'd gotten ourselves into. We were up against an ancient, powerful enemy that controlled the world from the shadows. But we had the truth on our side, and somehow, some way, we were going to make sure the world knew about the Reptilian Elite, no matter what it cost us. I woke up with a start, my heart racing. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The Reptilian, our escape, Jake's bunker. I looked over to see Sarah still sleeping fitfully on the small cot next to mine. I checked my watch. We'd been asleep for almost 12 hours. After the terror and exhaustion of the previous day, our bodies had desperately needed the rest, but now it was time to get to work. I gently woke Sarah, and we made our way up the ladder and out of the bunker. The smell of coffee greeted us as we entered Jake's kitchen. Jake was sitting at the table, surrounded by stacks of papers and a laptop. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. "Good, you're up," he said, pushing mugs of coffee towards us. "We've got a lot to do." As we sipped our coffee, Jake laid out his plan. "We need to gather all the evidence we can," he explained. "Photos, videos, testimonies from people who've seen things. Then we're going to put it all together and release it to the world." "But how?" I asked. "You said yourself that they control the media, the internet. How can we get the truth out there?" Jake grinned. "I've been preparing for this for years. I've got connections with independent journalists, underground networks, even some hackers. We're going to hit them from all angles, flood every channel we can with the truth." It sounded crazy, but it was the only plan we had, so we got to work. For the next few days, we barely slept. Jake had collected an incredible amount of information over the years. We sorted through it all, organizing the most convincing evidence. Sarah used her IT skills to verify the video she'd found, proving it hadn't been tampered with. I wrote up our eyewitness account of the reptilian's transformation, trying to capture every terrifying detail. Jake reached out to his contacts, preparing them for what was coming. He was careful, using encrypted messages and code words. We couldn't risk the reptilians finding out what we were up to. As we worked, Jake filled us in on more of what he'd learned over the years. The reptilians had been on Earth for thousands of years, he said. They'd shaped human civilization from the shadows, instigating wars, controlling economies, even influencing our religions. "But why?" Sarah asked. "What do they want?" Jake's face darkened. "That's the big question. Some think they feed off our negative emotions, fear, anger, hatred. Others believe they're preparing Earth for a full-scale invasion. But the truth is, we just don't know." On the fourth day, as we were putting the finishing touches on our evidence package, we heard a sound that made our blood run cold. Cars pulling up outside, doors slamming. Jake rushed to the window and peeked out. His face went pale. "They're here," he whispered. My heart started racing. "How did they find us?" "Doesn't matter," Jake said, rushing to his computer. "We're out of time. We have to release everything now." As Jake's fingers flew over the keyboard, uploading our evidence to every platform he could, I heard a loud bang on the front door. "Open up!" a voice shouted. "We know you're in there!" Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" I looked around frantically, trying to think. Then I spotted it, a back door, partially hidden behind some boxes. "Jake," I said, "how long do you need?" He didn't look up from his computer. 2 minutes, maybe 3. I nodded, making a decision. Okay, Sarah, you stay and help Jake. Make sure everything gets uploaded. I'll distract them. What? No, Sarah protested. It's too dangerous. We don't have a choice, I said. This is bigger than us now. The world needs to know the truth. Before they could argue, I headed for the front door. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else, but I knew what I had to do. I opened the door to find 3 men in suits standing there. Their eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, but I could feel their cold stare. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man in front smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know why we're here. Where are the others?" I stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm alone here." The man's smile faded. "Don't lie to us, human. We can smell your fear." As he spoke, I saw it again. That shimmer under his skin, the brief flash of something inhuman in his eyes. They were reptilians, all 3 of them. I backed away slowly, my eyes darting around for any escape route. "Look," I said, "I don't want any trouble. Why don't we just talk about this?" The lead reptilian took a step towards me. "Oh, we're past talking. You've seen too much, known too much." Suddenly, he lunged at me, moving faster than any human could. I turned to run, but I knew I couldn't outpace them. Just then, I heard Jake's voice shout from inside the house. "It's done! Everything's uploaded!" The reptilians froze for a moment, processing what that meant. It was all the distraction I needed. I bolted, running as fast as I could towards the street. Behind me, I could hear angry hissing and the sound of pursuit. As I ran, I saw people coming out of their houses, looking confused. In the distance, I could hear sirens. I realized that Jake must have succeeded. The truth was out there now. People were seeing the evidence, learning about the reptilians for the first time. But I couldn't stop to celebrate. I had to keep running. The reptilians were still after me, and I knew they wouldn't stop until they caught me. As I fled down the street, my lungs burning and my legs aching, I wondered what would happen next. The world was about to change in a big way. The lies we'd been told for centuries were finally being exposed. But the reptilians wouldn't go down without a fight. And right now, that fight was focused on me. I turned a corner, desperately looking for somewhere to hide. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. I knew I couldn't run forever. As the truth about the Reptilian Elite spread across the world, my own fight for survival was just beginning. I ducked into an alley, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the reptilians getting closer, their inhuman hisses echoing off the buildings. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out of this. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm, pulling me behind a dumpster. I almost cried out, but another hand clamped over my mouth. "Shh," a familiar voice whispered. "It's me." I turned to see Sarah crouching beside me, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. Relief flooded through me. "What are you doing here?" I whispered back. "Where's Jake?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "They got him. He stayed behind to make sure everything uploaded. He told me to run." My heart sank. Jake had sacrificed himself to get the truth out. I hoped it was worth it. We huddled behind the dumpster, barely daring to breathe as we heard the reptilians enter the alley. Their footsteps were unnaturally quiet, but we could hear them sniffing the air. "They're close," one of them hissed. "I can smell their fear." I looked at Sarah, seeing my own terror reflected in her eyes. This was it. We were going to die here in this dirty alley at the hands of the monsters we'd tried to expose. But then, something unexpected happened. We heard a commotion from the street, people shouting, car horns blaring. "What's going on?" one of the reptilians asked. "Sir," another voice said, sounding worried, "we're getting reports. The video is everywhere. People are panicking. Some are even fighting back." The lead reptilian let out an angry hiss. "Impossible! How could they believe such ridiculous claims? It's not just the video, sir. There are incidents. Some of our kind are losing control of their forms in public. It's chaos out there." There was a long moment of silence. Then, "Fall back. We need to regroup and contain this." We heard them leave the alley, their footsteps fading away. Sarah and I looked at each other, hardly daring to believe it. We were alive, And more importantly, people knew the truth. Cautiously, we emerged from our hiding spot. The street outside was in uproar. People were gathered around phones and tablets watching the evidence we'd released. Some looked scared, others angry. A few were even celebrating. As we watched, a well-known politician walked by, flanked by security guards. Someone in the crowd pointed at him, shouting, "Reptile, he's one of them!" To our shock, the politician's face seemed to ripple. For a brief moment, his features became distinctly reptilian before snapping back to human. The crowd gasped, some people screaming in terror. "It's all true," Sarah whispered, gripping my arm. "What do we do now?" I shook my head, still trying to process everything. "I don't know, but we can't stay here. It's not safe." We started walking, trying to blend in with the chaotic crowd. Everywhere we looked, the world seemed to be falling apart and rebuilding itself. People were coming together, sharing information, organizing. I saw neighbors who'd never spoken before now standing united against a common threat. It was terrifying, but also oddly inspiring. As we turned a corner, we saw a group of people gathered around a makeshift barricade. They were arming themselves with whatever they could find: baseball bats, kitchen knives, even gardening tools. A tough-looking woman who seemed to be in charge spotted us. "Hey, you two, are you with us or against us?" I hesitated, not sure how to respond, but Sarah stepped forward. "We're with you," she said firmly. "We helped expose the truth." The woman's eyes widened. "You're the ones from the video? Quick, come with me. We've got a safe house nearby." As we followed her through the chaotic streets, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. The world had changed forever in just a few short days. The reptilians' control was crumbling, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. And we, the ones who had started it all, were now right in the middle of it. The war for Earth had begun, and somehow we'd become key players. As we entered the safe house, I saw people from all walks of life working together, planning, preparing. They looked up as we entered, hope and determination in their eyes. I realized then that this was just the beginning. We had a long fight ahead of us, but for the first time, humanity was united against a common enemy. And maybe, just maybe, we had a chance to take back our world from the Reptilian Elite. The safe house was a flurry of activity. People were coming and going, sharing information, planning strategies. It was overwhelming, but also exciting. For the first time since this all began, I felt like we weren't alone. The woman who had brought us here, who introduced herself as Maria, sat us down and quickly brought us up to speed. "The reptilians are losing control," she explained. "Your video, combined with their own slip-ups, has blown their cover wide open, but they're not giving up without a fight." She showed us reports coming in from around the world. In some places, the reptilians had abandoned their human disguises entirely, revealing their true forms and attacking openly. In others, they were desperately trying to maintain control, using their human puppets to dismiss the evidence as an elaborate hoax. "We're organizing resistance cells all over the globe," Maria continued, "but we need your help. You two are the faces of this revolution now. People will listen to you." I felt a weight settle on my shoulders. We'd wanted to expose the truth, but I hadn't really thought about what would happen next. Now it seemed we were leaders in a war against an alien race that had controlled humanity for thousands of years. "What can we do?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. Maria smiled grimly. "We need you to tell your story, the whole story. Help people understand what we're up against. And we need your help planning our next moves. You've seen the reptilians up close. You know things about them that could be crucial." Over the next few days, Sarah and I threw ourselves into the resistance effort. We recorded videos, gave interviews to underground news networks, and helped strategize with resistance leaders from around the world. We learned more about the reptilians too. They weren't invincible. They had weaknesses we could exploit. For one, they were cold-blooded, which meant extreme temperatures could disorient them and make it harder for them to maintain their human forms. We started organizing raids on their strongholds using thermal weapons. We also discovered that certain frequencies of sound could disrupt their shape-shifting abilities. Sarah worked with a team of engineers to develop portable devices that could emit these frequencies, giving us a way to reveal hidden reptilians. But it wasn't all victories. The reptilians were fighting back hard. They had technology far beyond ours, and they weren't afraid to use it. Cities were devastated by weapons we couldn't even understand. Millions of people died in the first week alone. And then there were the human collaborators, people who had knowingly worked with the reptilians, helping them maintain their control over humanity. Some did it for power, others out of fear. But now they were fighting alongside the reptilians, seeing it as their only chance for survival. One night, about a week into the war, I found myself unable to sleep. I wandered out of the safe house and onto the roof, needing some fresh air. To my surprise, I found Sarah already there, staring out at the city. Fires burned on the horizon, and the sky was filled with strange lights from battles we couldn't see. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Sarah asked as I sat down beside her. "Exposing them?" I was quiet for a moment, considering her question. "I don't know," I finally said, "but I know we couldn't have kept living a lie. Humanity deserved to know the truth, even if it's a painful one." Sarah nodded slowly. I never imagined it would be like this. All this death and destruction." "Me neither," I admitted. "But we can't give up now. We have to see this through." As we sat there watching our world burn and be reborn, I thought about everything that had led us to this moment. It had started with a simple curiosity, a desire to know the truth. Now we were at the center of a war for the very future of humanity. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we'd win this war or what winning would even look like. But I knew we had to keep fighting. For Jake, who had given his life to expose the truth. For all the humans who had lived and died never knowing the reality of their world. And for the future generations who deserved to live free from the control of the Reptilian Elite. As the sun began to rise, painting the smoke-filled sky with streaks of red and gold, I made a silent vow. No matter what it took, no matter how long it took, we would reclaim our world. The reptilians had ruled from the shadows for thousands of years, but their time was over. The dawn of a new era was breaking, and humanity would face it united, standing in the light of truth. Little did I know, our greatest challenges and our greatest revelations were still to come. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. The war against the reptilians had escalated beyond anything we could have imagined. Every day brought new challenges, new horrors, and sometimes new hope. We'd managed to set up a global network of resistance cells, coordinating our efforts against the reptilian strongholds. Our tech team, led by Sarah, had made some incredible breakthroughs. They'd reverse-engineered some of the reptilian technology, giving us a fighting chance against their advanced weapons. But the reptilians were far from defeated. They'd revealed more of their true power, and it was terrifying. They had ships that could lay waste to entire cities in minutes, weapons that could control the weather, causing hurricanes and earthquakes at will. And worst of all, they had a way of taking over human minds, turning our own people against us. We never knew who we could trust. Friends, family members, even fellow resistance fighters could suddenly turn on us, their eyes glowing with an alien light. Despite all this, humanity was holding its ground. The revelation of the reptilians' existence had united us in a way nothing ever had before. Old enemies were now fighting side by side. Resources were being shared freely across borders. It was as if the petty conflicts of the past had been burned away, leaving only the pure will to survive. One day, as I was helping coordinate a major offensive against a reptilian base, Maria burst into the command center, her face pale. "We've got a problem," she said, her voice tight with stress. "A big one." She pulled up a video on the main screen. It showed a reptilian leader, one we'd come to know as High Commander Zex, standing in front of what looked like a massive machine. "Humans," Zex hissed, his reptilian features twisting into a mockery of a smile. "You have fought bravely but foolishly. Did you really think you could defeat us? We who have guided your species since you first crawled out of the muck?" He gestured to the machine behind him. "This is the Chronos engine. With it we can manipulate time itself. Unless you surrender immediately, we will use it to erase your resistance from history. You will wake up tomorrow in a world where you never discovered our existence, where you remain our docile slaves." The video cut off, leaving us in stunned silence. "Is that possible?" I asked, looking around at the shocked faces of our team. "Can they really change history?"